Hello, it is Tuesday, and this is the one office hour this week. I'm Emily Friedman, and we are having a super fun and weird time as we wrap up Alice is Missing. So, as I've said in previous reports in, Alice is Missing is a staple of my TTRPG class. I have run it every single time I have taught a version of this course. For the first time ever in the last 3 years, I had students who missed class. And because we were playing very intentionally across 3 full days means more possibilities for students to be absent. So, part of what we did in the debrief today was talk about basically the decision I had made to front load labor, do a lot of character creation and no play on day one, have a full day of play of an hour on day two, and then the final day for the last half hour and debrief and final rituals. And as it turns out, didn't seem to actually work. We haven't gotten to a better solution, I regret to inform. But there was definitely the sense that we needed that time to do character creation and relationship building and setup. That's was not wasted time. However, I think one of the quick fixes that we'll do next time is we will do that labor on a Thursday and then on Monday, do 45 minutes of gameplay. In other words, half of the timer. And then have 1 day break, Wednesday, and then complete the game on Thursday. Even with a 45-minute run on the second day, that gives us a good 30 minutes for debrief. And if we really needed to push it further in terms of debriefing, we could. But I think a half an hour was enough. So the question becomes in a 75-minute class, and students are saying probably shouldn't play more than half the game at a time if you're going to break it into two halves. Probably shouldn't play more than half the game at a time if you're going to break it into two halves. What does one do with the other half hour? I'm not sure yet. Um, one possibility is intensifying the immersion into character and starting some rituals at the beginning of the first day of play that allow students to kind of move in more intentionally. And that is coming for me from one of the other reflections that students had, which was we've had some character based exploration in terms of dialect in class before. And of course, For the Queen has a kind of emergent character experience. But this was the first time that they had a very particularized character in quite the way with very clearly stated relationships, not just of kind of relationships to ideology or investments the way that dialect does, or relationships to the queen as the unnamed courtiers of For the Queen do. And what one of the interesting things and what one of the interesting things was that students found some students had been given drives by virtue of the way that drives are randomly assigned that they didn't really feel like they could play. And this is actually going to lead to some really good questions for Gabe Hicks and Matt Mercer in the coming days. But that didn't help them while they were playing. So it occurs to me that if we can, next time, we have the exercise of thinking about character sheets and character creation, which has been part of previous versions of this class, but wasn't kind of set aside as a particular assignment day. That's one way of getting students into thinking about this. Another thought is to see if I can get an actual player, someone who thinks about performance and getting into character, um, Earlier on in the semester, Josh Simons is super great and has some experience, but he comes to this through a slightly um, earlier on in the semester. Josh Simons is super great and has some experience, but he comes to this through a slightly different method. And Ned came early enough, and his own practice is distinct from play enough that while we've had folks in the sphere in our conversational loop, we haven't had someone who thinks like an actor or an improviser in quite the way that some other actual play folks do. So, this may be a time when I kind of loop in someone like my friend and colleague, Dr. Evan Torner, who is a scholar of LARP and thinks about these things very intentionally, or seeing if I can rustle up some more readings and thinking in terms of the work of Janaea Kemper earlier on in the semester for her work and framing, which may be useful. So I'm thinking that maybe Alice needs a little bit more support for students. But I think the friction and the challenges are themselves educational for students. But I think the friction and the challenges are themselves educational. So hopefully that's useful. The other challenge, the challenge of students not being present in class, was a very real one, and it's one that many of us face as we're teaching. For one, we're still in an ongoing health crisis where people shouldn't come to class if they're not feeling well. It's not of use to them and their long-term health, nor the health of their classmates. And this time of year is rife with illness in many ways. It's cold and flu season after all. In addition, current events mean that some people, especially where I teach, where there's a lot of ties to active duty military, mean that people are finding themselves really shaken by global events that are actually closer to home than you'd think. So, these, along with many other reasons why mid semester is particularly challenging for these kinds of play experiences, mean that either Alice needs to move earlier in the semester in order to capture a time when students are more likely to not end up missing class because the illness season is different or what have you. Um, or we need to build in more kind of uh, fall fallout is not the word I want. Some safety nets. Functionally, we had 3 tables, of which one table, all of the participants save one were not in attendance today. That luckily, that student was playing a role that was not already being played at another Alice table. But still, because so much of the game had already been played, this character rolling in the last half hour was mostly an observer to the group chat, and that was kind of a bummer. So this is one of the reasons why students suggest that the game be split more like 45 minutes, because the student who missed character development day but played the rest of the game had a little bit of catching up to do, but far less, and there was less friction involved in that particular kind of reintegration. It's possible that the new expansions of Alice is Missing, which I backed on Kickstarter, may alleviate some of these challenges, especially if it allows for play of larger groups. It's less of an issue and less of a likelihood that an entire table will fall apart if we can have just a slighter, kind of larger number of people at the table. My classroom is around 15 students. So if I can have a 7-person table, as unwieldy as it is for kind of the logics of Alice, that might have saved us. It's hard to know. But these are the things that I'm talking about, and I was thinking about and talking about with students. But these are the things that I'm talking about, and I was thinking about and talking